Hey everyone. So, I'm really sorry not to be there today. I'm sure I'm having a tremendous time grading so many papers. But you're in great hands, and I just thought I'd go through a few things about the paper today. Let's get right to it.
Okay, writing a research paper like a superhero. Let's get right into it. All right, so we've been given a prompt, and you looked at the prompt, and you might have had the following reactions to a few things in there. Particularly, we had a length requirement. A lot of people look right at that first thing and, oh my gosh, how am I possibly going to write 5 or 6 pages on this topic? And if that's the case, you might have, I don't know, felt like this little cat here. um, the other thing that we might have looked at and been a little bit unsure of or had a little bit of anxiety about was the requirement to add something new. Might have felt like Kevin from Home Alone here. Oh my gosh, how am I possibly going to do that? But don't fear, okay? If you've done the stasis map, you've already done most of the heavy lifting. In fact, in traditional classes, you're just given a research topic and you have to go through all the heavy lifting and find sources and compile them together, see what kind of things they're arguing, what they're talking about, figure out their disagreements, and then figure out what you're going to write about. But if you've done the stasis map, it already should be pointing directions at what are different things that are worth talking about in your topic, because no good academic article will just simply rehash another claim. No, they'll try to add something new or at least contribute to a conversation in a meaningful way, because nobody wants to just reread something that someone else has already written about, right? So do know that you've done a lot of the work already with your stasis map. You also just know a lot about your topic. So in this way, I like to think of myself as like an expert. Think of yourself as having a license to write. A license to write. Don't kill anybody. License to write. And this is because obviously you've read perhaps at least 5, perhaps more articles about your topic, and have been considering a wide spectrum of different views, trying to be unbiased, right? So you have a good sense of your topic, probably far better than a lot of your peers, and perhaps even better than me, depending on what your topic is. So I would just take that to heart. Take to the heart that you are an expert. Even if you've only read 5 articles, like 2 of those were probably academic articles, and they read like 30 or 40, they probably read hundreds of articles. So you have a good considerable amount of knowledge packed into that stasis map. The other thing, and we've already kind of touched on this, is that if you've done the stasis map, you've done the big battle that a lot of academics face when they're writing research papers. Is that one thing that they try to do is find places where the argument is unsettled, because as we just said, there's no reason to rehash an argument that everyone already knows, right? You want to find places where the conversation is unsettled or it's not fully established, because, like I said, people don't want to read papers of things they've already read before. All right, so we've already been sort of touching on this, but what makes a good academic paper? To get into that, we really need to understand why academics write papers to begin with. And I like to think of a good academic paper as really starting and ending with just a good idea, just something worthwhile to share. I mean, I really strongly believe, and I think a lot of people feel this way too, that just the good papers just have really good ideas, just something sophisticated, complex, meaningful. And this way, I like to think of a good idea as kind of like a virus. Those good papers, they kind of like infect everyone around them, just like a virus that you'd find in some like zombie plague movie or whatever, where the really powerful and strong papers just spread to other people. One person starts talking about the idea, and then another person says, hey, have you read this person's idea? And then suddenly there's this huge influence, or this idea just starts to proliferate and go and move to other regions, and other people are talking about your great idea. I mean, those are the really good papers where where your ideas become infectious. And this brings us to our second point here is, why do scholars read academic papers? Well, they want to be infected, really. They want to be at the limits of knowledge, is what I'd say. Their jobs as academics is to understand all the key features, all the key facts in a particular topic, and that includes being up to date with the recent knowledge, the recent writings of that particular topic. So if you have something to add to that add to the conversation, they want to read your paper because it's their job to understand all the new emerging ideas and the old ideas and everything, really. All right, so what does all this tell us? One, it tells us that we should not be doing a book report, right? I've said don't rehash the arguments a million times now, but don't do a book report. Don't just simply state what, just don't turn your paper into a list of the evidence of your sources. Okay, we've already done the stasis map where we've just piled evidence into a page. An argumentative research paper is not that. It's not rewriting or recrafting your author's arguments. In fact, if you do that, that's what we consider plagiarism. Plagiarism is not just simply repeating someone's words word for word. Plagiarism is just the general idea of stealing someone's ideas, okay, without giving them credit for that. So even if you reword someone else's argument, that really is technically plagiarism, because you're just simply restating their ideas and pretending like they're your own. Instead, what you should really keep in mind is that this is your paper. Your reader is reading your paper because they're interested in what you have to say. All right, so they're picking up your paper and going, okay, this person is an expert on this particular topic. I really want to understand what do they have to say? What do they have to contribute? What can I learn from them? And that's really the mindset that we want to have when we're writing a paper, that to claim ownership over our own ideas, and to realize that it's our readers are not reading to read the evidence that you've read. They're reading to read you and your ideas. All right, so where do I start? Well, of course, you should start with an eye-popping, wonderful claim that blows everyone's mind and makes people want to build a shrine in your honor. Here's your shrine. Best paper ever shrine. Oh, great. No, I'm totally kidding. Wouldn't that be wonderful, right? If you could just automatically come up with a claim. If you can, great, do that. I'm really jealous and kind of hate you a little bit if you're able to do that, but because most of us can't do that. No, instead, I would say, just start with an idea. Like, maybe you have an idea. Hey, I think there's maybe something to this, or start with an idea. It can be trivial, simplistic, boring. That's okay. The process really of writing and research will actually start to refine and reshape and deepen your argument. I think one of the problems that a lot of people face when they write is they don't realize that the process of writing refines your argument. So you want to leave room for that if you can. That's why it's so important to start writing early, right? Because as you start writing, you'll probably start thinking of better ideas than you started with. And so if you have time to be able to still revise and be like, oh wow, this is so much more interesting, so much more meaningful, it's great to just go that direction. So it's okay to start with a trivial, simplistic, or boring idea, as long as you've left yourself some space to be able to come back and revise that idea as your thinking deepens when you start writing and finding more research. So that's why we're going to see this little mantra, start writing today, very often. All right, the second strategy, so you can start with a simplistic claim, or you can consider the gaps in your research. We've already been doing this in your stasis map, and if you had to write the review section of the stasis map, then you probably have already been thinking about this. But some questions to consider would be like, where does disagreement exist within my sources? Maybe choose a level of stasis that it seems to have the most disagreement, or people just seem so unresolved or unsettled. Like, that might be a good place to pitch your argument, because it seems like that really matters to a lot of readers, because no one can come to a consensus, right? You don't want to choose a level of stasis where everyone seems to be in agreement. maybe not that many people, a lot of people talk about the cause and effect of whether or not violent video games cause aggression, but maybe not many people bring up solutions. So that might be meaningful. So when we're talking about a gap, we're talking about a place where it seems like something's missing. And that could be that people haven't been talking about it. It's just missing from the debate. No one's really given much thought. Or it can be something that's just unresolved. Like no one seems to come to a consensus whether or not violent video games cause aggression. Or maybe a topic where only like a few people have talked about it or only briefly talked about a certain subject and you feel like it should be given more weight. So those are when we talk about gaps. We're talking about places where something's missing and you can add something, you can contribute something to the conversation. The other thing to note, you'll see a link there. If you're looking at the PowerPoint by yourself there, then you'll notice there's a link there. I'm not going to click on it just for the sake of time, but if you look at introductions and conclusions in academic writing, you'll notice that this is what authors do. They address gaps in the research. They will, in the introduction, they often say like, much of the research that has been done has shown blah, 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 and blah, 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 but they have not done this, and that's what I'm going to do. A lot of intros do that. That's called establishing the gap. And actually, most academics do that. They try to show, hey, this is where I fit meaningfully into the conversation. A lot of times, conclusions do this too. So you could look at your conclusions to papers that you've read, and you might notice they'll give you a gap. They'll say like, more work should be done on this. Or you can look in your proposal section. Maybe you noted those gaps. So anyway, intros and conclusions are great places to see how people use gaps in the research, the intros, and conclusions are good places to see where other authors have illustrated the gaps in the research where other people could do some work. Okay, so casting a paper within Stasis. I want to really briefly go over this, but you're supposed to choose an area of stasis, fact definition, cause and effect, evaluation, or proposal, and then cast an argument within that level of stasis. And the reason it's really important to understand the kind of level of stasis that you're casting your argument in is because different arguments demand different kinds of reasoning. So for instance, if you're doing a cause and effect argument, you have to prove that differently than an evaluation claim. Right, so a cause and effect argument will require you to explain agency, to explain, no, these really are the factors that produced that result. Right, that's a different claim than an evaluation claim where you're judging whether something is good or bad or ethical or unethical or whatever. Okay, so this is why it's really important for us to unpack what are called warrants. These are all the assumptions that your readers hold. And that's something that we'll talk about more when we look at Tolman and the Tolman model. But anyway, start writing today. All right, so if you're thinking about doing a fact definition argument, just a little bit of review. Remember, when we're doing fact definition arguments, we're interested in questions of what happened or how do we define it. Is it true or untrue? Or how do we define or classify something? So fact definition claims concern a shared sense of reality and classification. Do I classify... If you had a claim like Nike's shoe company is not a socially responsible company. All right. So if you were trying to prove, for instance, that Nike is not a socially responsible company, then we would try to look for your reasons. What are your reasons for that? Why are you classifying Nike into this category of not socially responsible? What does it mean? What does not socially responsible mean for you? Maybe not socially responsible means treating people inhumanely. Maybe it means imposing hardships on other people. Maybe it means not benefiting society. Maybe, I don't know. It depends on what your definition of that. But that will be an example of a definitional argument. And then we look for evidence. Evidence of the company using like East Asian sweatshops, or evidence that there are inhumane conditions in these shops. evidence of hardships imposed on the workers. So that would be an example of a fact definitional argument. But notice how we try to fit everything into this shared classification. Yes, the Nike company should be placed into the classification of socially irresponsible. All right, so if you're thinking about doing a fact definition argument, I'm not going to go over all this stuff, but this could be a way to organize or outline your fact definition argument. Okay, so this is an example of an outline. You can see this on online in the PowerPoint. All right, so moving on to cause and effect. If you're deciding to do cause and effect, the things that we're focusing on cause and effect are a little bit different, right? In cause and effect arguments, we're interested in how did this happen or what are its effects. As we discussed before, cause and effect arguments are interested in something's agency, in something's ability or power to produce or affect change, okay? So whenever you unpack your reasons or your warrants, your reasons, it will be something about agency. Like in these kind of arguments, you're trying to explain or show like why an effect was produced or why certain factors would produce an effect. Let's say if you're doing like violent video games contributed to the Columbine school shooting or whatever. I mean, no one would do this in our paper because you didn't research that. But if I was to do that kind of argument, I might try to come up with reasons why video games would be the cause. Maybe I would show, have one paragraph where I talk about how many young people play violent video games and that there's a strong correlation between the number of most killers play violent video games. Or maybe I would show evidence of how violent the games are, or maybe I would show psychological evidence of how video games affect people's brains, or I would maybe discuss how these video games make people find violence pleasurable or whatever. So my point is that you would try to show that it's reasonable to see that this thing would cause this thing, is what we would do in cause and effect arguments. Anyway, so start writing today so your cause and effect's not like that. All right, so if you're planning on doing a cause and effect argument, here are 3 different ways that you can organize your cause and effect claims. All right. So again, I'm not going to go over them. Just go ahead and download PowerPoint, and you can just look at each one of those and see if one of those models, there's 3 organizational plans there, might work for you to organize a cause and effect kind of argument. If you're doing evaluation, on the other hand, we're interested in questions of goodness or morality. Remember, we're doing a judgment. Arguments of evaluation are made about the quality of things. It's an argument which is concerned with something's value, all right? And as we did in class, remember we did the thing with the whiteboards, and in the whiteboards we came up with, we were doing what are called categorical evaluations. We were looking at the different standards for our judgment. So when we judge different food chains or different directors, we were thinking about, okay, what standards do I have for judging a film director or for a restaurant? What do I look for in order to make my judgment? Okay, so same thing too, if you're doing a evaluation argument, then you need to think about your judgments. So for example, like if you were doing a judgment, if your argument was that Ford Escort is a good car for you at college, then you would want to come up with your standards. Like, what are your reasons to support this? Well, what might be that value for the money as a criterion to support your claim of a good car. A good car holds value for the money. Or maybe another one would be its longevity. It's built, that it would last a long time. So you would try to come up with criteria to support your claims. But anyway, when you're doing your evaluation arguments, here are some sample plans that you could use if you want. But notice that they all rely on creating criteria and then matching that criteria. So, you try to defend, hey, your criteria is an acceptable way of judging whether, for instance, a car is good or not, and then you try to illustrate that yes, the Ford Escort does fit, is really dependable. Let me show you evidence of that, and then conclude. Remember to start writing today. And then the final stasis that you could cast your argument in is proposal. All right, so if you're doing a proposal, remember these are calls to action where you're going to give your reader a suggestion on what they should or should not do. Okay, and these kind of arguments are done in a problem solution kind of format. So where you illustrate a problem and then you suggest a solution. Just remember that, because if there's no problem, then there's no reason to even support to propose a solution, right? So you have to suggest that there's a problem in these kind of claims first, outline your solution, and then finally justify your solution, that your solution will actually fix that problem. So proposals are problem solution formats. So this would be maybe an example of doing a proposal argument. Notice that there's a lot more that goes into a proposal argument. So these are obviously the easiest papers to write, really long papers. So, and then finally you show that your solution will resolve that problem. And then remember to start writing today to write effective papers. But anyway, that's all I got for you, and look forward to seeing you guys soon.